All right. Hey, everybody. Let me know if y'all can hear me. But we can just go ahead and get started as people keep coming in. I want to thank you all for being here. I'm Rachel Larkin. I'm actually your conference chair for this year. And just like many of y'all, I'm a second year. I'm at the VCOM Virginia campus. And so I'm going through board season just like y'all as well. So I'm really excited we're doing this too. So today's meeting is just meant to be casual and relaxed, so you can ask any questions related to boards as it's going to be over before we know it. If you're not comfortable with unmuting yourself, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and you can even send them privately if you prefer that too. So to kick things off, let's just get to know each of our panelists. So if y'all could please introduce yourself by sharing your name, what school you're at, and just where you're currently at in life and rotations. Shelby, you want to start us off?
Sure. So I'm Shelby. I'm the secretary. I'm a third year at VCOM Virginia, and I'm currently in Newport News, Virginia, doing rotations and gearing up for step two, but it really feels like step one was just yesterday.
Thanks, girl. Emily, you want to say hey?
Hello, so I'm Emily. I'm a fourth year at LECOM in Erie. I just finished my auditions and interviews and just kind of waiting for rank lists and match day.
Manali, you want to say hey?
Hello, I'm Manali. I'm also a third year, but I'm at the VCOM Louisiana campus. Yeah, I can't remember the other questions, but yeah.
What rotation are you on right now?
I'll start peds on Monday.
Kumi, hey, you want to say hi?
Hey, I'm Kumi. I'm fourth year at the University of New England, currently at home in Connecticut and doing this to procrastinate packing and help y'all because I am off to Syracuse tomorrow. I have one more interview to go in 2 weeks and then just two more rotations and then I will be on vacation.
Good luck on the interview. Is Chance here? I thought I saw him here, but I know he's busy. So he's also part of our panelists, so hopefully he'll chime in whenever he's available. And then Erin is also coming too. She's our current VP. So thank you for all the panelists being here. Manali, has there been anybody with any initial questions in the chat?
I haven't seen any, but I will chime in when we see some. But if you guys do have questions,
Perfect.
send it and I'll
Yeah,
make
does
sure.
anyone have like an off the bat question right now? If not, something I wanted to bring up is that there's been lots of discussion among first and second years, at least at my school, and I think it's also spreading around concerning the need for actually taking step one. I want y'all to please just share your perspective on this trending conversation and how it applies to those pursuing an orthopedic residency.
So I had all the intentions to take step one because the word always has been if you're pursuing a competitive specialty to take step one in addition to CONLEX. And so that's what I was going to do. But as like my further answers to other questions will show, like I consider myself the case of like what not to do board studying wise. I bit off way more than I could chew with I was planning my own wedding during dedicated and like got married in the middle of board season and got a new puppy and moved and like all these big life stuff on top of board studying. So at the end of the day, I canceled step one. And thus far, I've had like no negative outcomes from that. Like I talked to a bunch of programs before I made the decision to do so about like if I would get screened out or if that would limit me. And the overall consensus I got was like, no, it doesn't matter. Which is good now, but it was very stressful at the time. And I think if you're on the border with your decision making, I would honestly take it because I think it's better to like get everything done that you could possibly do for your application. So I still, even though I've gotten like a lot of reinsurance from programs, I'm still nervous at the end of the day they're gonna be unhappy that I didn't take it. But I am gonna take both COMLEX level 2 and USMLE step 2 because they're scored. So obviously that has more bearing now. But that was my own experience.
I'll just share my perspective on it. I agree. I mean, everyone just says like take it if you want to be competitive. I did take both. I mean, I don't know. I've heard people who didn't take it and maybe didn't even do great on their level 2 and they got all of the interviews at their auditions. So I kind of feel like it's one of those things where if you do well on your auditions, your scores don't really matter. But beyond your auditions, you might not necessarily get interviews. So it's just kind of like that's what you would be maybe missing out on. But I don't know. I think it's kind of like a personal decision too for a lot of people.
I'm a prime example of someone who did not do well on their boards and still got interviews at places they rotated and interviews at places that I didn't even rotate. So it definitely has a lot to do with your audition. Obviously, I didn't like bomb my boards, but not nowhere near where the average of an ortho applicant should be. But I think in terms of step one, like if you really don't feel comfortable where there's a chance that you could fail it, obviously failing is not good and it kind of puts you out of the running for something competitive like ortho. So, I mean, if you're at that point, then I would probably just stick with level 1 and it'll be fine. But definitely plan on taking step 2 and level 2. And I actually know an ortho resident who only took COMLEX level 1 and level 2. So there's that. I think it depends on if you're really trying to go for any traditionally allopathic programs or just sticking with the traditionally osteopathic ones as well. But yeah, my advice is obviously if it's an end all be all if you don't take both.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, ladies. Manali, how we doing?
We have some questions. I'll read the first one and we'll keep going down. The first one is, did any of you guys use the Anki deck and did you get through it all before boards? I'm not an Anki person. I've tried to be multiple times. So if someone else has some insight on the Anki deck, please chime in.
I'm not an Anki person either, but I did find Anki worked for like Pocket Pimped because I think it actually held my attention. But I just say do what you do like normally, like whatever works for you, keep doing that for board studying. You don't have to get caught up into like what everyone else is doing. So you know yourself better, you know.
I'm also not Anki, but I think if you are, just remain consistent with it and be honest with yourself if it's making a difference in your question sets. So no matter what you pick as your resource or your method, just make sure you're being consistent and seeing results. I also didn't do Anki for step 1. I just don't have the attention span or discipline to do that. So I just focused on UWorld.
I did not get through all of them.
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Okay. So actually, I think my video might be off. So or my audio. So I'm gonna turn off my video and hope that helps. But I did some of Anking, but then I found it was way too much. So I only did it for Sketchy. And then any of like the high yield decks, like turn up to OMT. There's an anatomy one. There's like one that has all the high yield stuff at the end of step or first aid. So I would do Anki for those things. And then if there is a topic that like I wanted to just pound into my head, I would just unsuspend those specific cards and do like a custom study.
Same here. I'm not an Anki person either. Apparently none of us are. But I thought it was helpful for sketchy stuff. So I did it for Sketchy Farm and Sketchy Micro to a degree. But this is also like one of the mistakes I realized I made along the way was like trying to reinvent my own study habits throughout boards because I was never Anki person through didactics. That's not how I studied. But I tried to install like what was historically like known to be good for board studying, like Boards and Beyond, Anki, and like it just wasn't my best study method for myself. So it was kind of me trying to force myself into a bad fit. And I do think the sketchy ones helped a bit, but that's also because I'm a very visual person. So it might just be a little bit of confounding variables and that I just like sketchy, and that's a good learning tool for me, not the Anki component.
To quickly add on to that before we go to the next question, I'm the same way. I struggled with boards because I would try to implement all these new things, and the biggest advice that I wish I followed was pick your few resources that you're gonna do and like stick to that, but not like keep adding more. And that's what I kept getting like OCD about it, and I'm like, no, I have to do everything because that's the only way I'll do well. But that's literally not the case, because you have to see all the material at some point. So if you don't finish anything, you'll never get to see what you need to see. But yeah, that's all I have for that one. The next question is, in the relatively earlier stages of prep, how do you balance between doing questions, board content review, and class material? I'll answer really quickly. I did not have a good balance with that. I definitely would just try to focus on actually understanding the system whenever we were still doing our systems review. But a lot of people can just do questions and just learn from the questions. I felt like I struggled a bit without having some sense of like a full system review, to kind of formulate like a differential in my head, if that makes sense. So that's what worked for me in the end. I felt like I was building a foundation. I feel like maybe I personally didn't have as great of a foundation from my first 2 years that I developed or whatever. So I needed to fix that part. And then from there, it made it a bit easier. But I do think, like we've heard a bunch of times, is like review the questions and like why you got them wrong. Can be like the biggest learning part of it. And everything else is like fixing whatever maybe your personal weaknesses maybe. But going through questions and really understanding why you missed it is, of course, the most helpful.
For the early stages, I feel like part of it too is just figuring out like how your own balance is going to work. I know like everyone wants to just do what everyone else says is best, but like you do have to take some time to like figure out like, oh, this is working for me or this is not, or like people like to do this, but like I hate it, like how all of us are kind of like not really Anki people. But I think, just little bits here and there, you just got to start with something and kind of keep doing it, staying consistent. It also depends on how your school teaches. So if you, like my school didn't really teach all that much board relevant material, so it kind of made it hard. And it kind of got to a point at the end of second year where I just kind of like I go to econ, we had mandatory lectures. So like I would literally sit in the back of the classroom and put my headphones in and watch like Sketchy or something because that was more productive for my time. And then I would study our class material and like less time later on. So however it works for you in your school and how much they teach that's board relevant during the day also.
I did not start studying basically until dedicated, which was another mistake. But what I wish I had done going back is starting questions sooner, like just doing like 10 questions a day. And then from there, gauging what areas you're like weak at. Like GI has always been a thorn in my side. So that could kind of help highlight like areas that you could benefit from content review more so. But if you're killing it at like OBGYN stuff, don't waste valuable time on doing a full content review on OBGYN, in my opinion. Like just like pick up what's difficult for you and revisit that. I had a 6-week dedicated and we took ComSci, I think 4 weeks into that, and our school had like a threshold of like what ComSci score you needed to have to be allowed per the school to sit for Comlex. And I didn't even take like most of dedicated seriously. Like I was like on the phone with my caterer for the wedding, like finalizing menus, and like I had a new puppy. So taking her out, keeping her from like chewing up all the furniture. So like I was not focused at all. I still passed boards, like we made it through, but like learn from my mistakes. It was extremely stressful. So do it all over again, I would have started questions a lot sooner. And our school, we were taking like 3 to 4 exams a week, and there was not a lot of extra time, it felt like, to do board studying on top of didactic material. And in my mind, I was like, oh, it's just pass fail. Like, how hard can it be? I just gotta pass it. So I was like, I can totally wait until dedicated to get started on this. Ain't no thing. Wrong. Don't be me. Do not.
Quick question. Did you guys use, or did any of your friends use the Blueprint Cram Fighter like scheduler around this stuff? I don't know if like anybody here has like heard of it or is currently using it. It's a free scheduler that like a friend in our class gave to. I don't even think my school like advertised it. But I'll like link it in the chat if everyone wants to look at it. But it really helped me like take a day by day of just pinching away at sketchies and boards and beyonds, and you can tailor it and organize it in a way that it matches up with whatever block system you're on. And so I just wanted to see if you guys like used it in the past or anything, or if you can even use it for step 2, I think, and level 2. But I'll just drop it in if anybody here is interested in it.
Yeah, I had heard about it, and I think it's great. Just make sure that you don't add too many resources if you do get the subscription or whatever. That's the only advice I've ever heard about it, is that like you don't need to keep checking off boxes. I think Sketchy and that stuff, like, yeah, go through all of it, but like some of these resources, kind of like how Shelby said, if you're great at OB-GYN, you don't need to watch every like OB-GYN pathoma video or whatever, because it takes valuable time from your already busy schedules. Okay, I think we have other questions. So really quickly, one had said, so hi Shelby, because she was mentioning about not taking step 1. Can you take step 2 without step 1? Just to add on to that, yes, you can. And to add on to what Kumi had said about you don't want to take step 1 and fail it. So if you had to choose, like, you should rather like want to not take step 1 and pass your step 2 and get whatever score, because if you end up taking step 1 and failing it and you end up wanting to take step 2, you have to report your step 1 score, like it, because it comes from like the same like score report or whatever. But if you never take step 1 or never even took the steps, if you never have to actually like report it, I guess is like what's been told to people. But yeah, you technically don't need to take your step 1 to take your step 2. And then the next question is, how did you use UWorld to guide learning other than just reading the explanations? If someone wants to answer that.
I can go for that. So I have basically a stuff I don't know list. And during second year, I got it, or no, third year, sorry. I got it done to a system where I would make different documents for different subjects. So I had one for like internal medicine, one for family medicine, one for surgery. And then I would further make like bookmarks into each like subcategory. And I would keep a running tab of all the questions I got wrong, copy all the charts in there and write it. And I would paraphrase the question and answer like in my own words. So I could go back and look at it and use that as my study guide and to go over things that I got wrong. And I would try to do that at the end of every week just to see like what I had built up, and keep track of it like that. And then another thing I forgot to add for level 2, I started unsuspending Anki cards based on topics that I got wrong. So like if I got something wrong about like the treatment for pyelo, I would just unsuspend those 5 cards. So I would still use Anki, but it was a lot more manageable in terms of how many cards I was doing. So that's also something I would do to supplement with like the UWorld explanation.
I was really similar to Kimi. I also kind of had documents for each month, like, or each rotation during third year. But just in general on UWorld, you can do this. And you can take kind of the questions that you're getting things wrong. And I would make charts. I'm a big chart person, so I would do a chart and kind of do things that are similar and then really highlight the differences between them. Because then like it kind of just like simplifies the amount of information that you have to process, and you're like, this is what makes this one unique, this is what makes that one different, and then you can kind of pick up on those subtleties in the questions, and it really helps differentiate like all of the gallbladder things, because they're all going to ask about it because they're confusing, and then you kind of have them down pat because you know the differences. So that's kind of what I did, and then I would also use them to review at the end, and when it got closer to board studying, it was nice because I had all these documents of like probably the things I didn't know. I didn't do it for everything, but the things I was consistently getting wrong and like confusing and mixing up.
Okay. The next question was, when should you start taking board prep seriously?
Right now. This call is perfectly timed. I just jumped on. I'm Chance. Sorry, I've got a brand new baby and had some family that was visiting. So sorry that I'm jumping on late. And I'm not sure exactly what you guys have talked about, but this meeting is perfectly timed because right now is the time to get going. Because each question, so first off, UWorld is king. If your school tries to tell you otherwise, they're wrong. UWorld is king. And part of the interesting thing about UWorld is that it's going to take forever to get through a block at the start, but that time will diminish as you become more and more familiar with the structure and the content of the questions. And so right now is a great time because it'll take forever. And so a good place to start is right now, maybe 20 questions a day, every day. Make cards on the things that you struggle with. Make sure that you've got it really nailed down. And then you'll start to see when dedicated time comes around, you'll be able to hit the ground running a lot better.
I'm not sure if anyone said this the few minutes prior to when I hopped on, but I think it's important to treat STEP and COMLEX as if they are not pass fail, because you obviously don't want to fail, but you want a very solid foundation going into second or third year when you need to take STEP and level 2. And like our school, we have like a week of dedicated. So like we're already studying all year. So you're not going to get like a nice 6-week runway for step 2. So if you have to relearn stuff from step 1 that you weren't solid on or didn't bother to really know inside and out, you're going to be playing catch up. So I would say just treat this like you need a score, but like don't kill yourself doing it, but treat it like you need a score for sure and start now.
And to clarify, based on the comment, I guess it was asked by an MS1. So I guess now is not necessarily the time to be actively board prep. So work really hard on your classes to get the foundational. That's the perfect time to be using, whatever the review source that you like. It could be Boards and Beyond is good, but they go into a lot of detail. It could be, your Sketchy, your first day. These are very good things to spend a little bit of time in early on. And then about halfway through second year is the time to really buckle down and start UWorld. I kind of took this approach of like, oh, I need to save UWorld. And I think I don't think that's a great approach, honestly, because UWorld is it teaches you how to think and you need kind of some longevity there. And I actually didn't even make it all the way through UWorld before taking step 1. And I really wish, because I ended up just being like too crunched into I need to hit my weak points. And I really wish I would have started harder earlier.
To add on, my school made us like do a certain number of like true learn questions or whatever, which is supposed to be like the COMLEX based questions. I personally felt like I was using my OMM knowledge as a crutch during those kinds of questions that I would do. So I felt like I learned a little later on that if I just kept focusing on those UWorld questions, I would know just the medicine part, and any additional OMM knowledge that I would need for my level 1, I would know separately. But you don't really need to constantly practice your OMM knowledge when you're just trying to diagnose like a gallbladder issue. So yeah, I would say like UWorld once again is king. And that helped me kind of with the progressing my studies.
And also actually building off that a little bit, I liked the strategy, our school kind of tried to talk us out of it. I liked the strategy of focusing on, UWorld for USMLE, and then I took Comlex about, I think 4 or 5 days later. It allowed me one day to just let my head explode and recover, and then a couple days to just kind of pound through some high yield review stuff. My school, I know, was very aggressive in teaching OMM, so I felt like I had a really solid base, so I didn't need to do that much review anyway. And then also just a general test taking strategy for Comlex. There's a lot of questions, so just keeping a heads up. There's a lot of questions that have a full OMM diagnosis included right smack dab in the middle of a question that has nothing to do with the OMM. It's like, oh, you test their sacrum, your ILA is like this, their sacral sulcus is like this, and and it's this whole thing, and it's like a gallbladder question. So there's just you like just look at the last line, get some idea of what is this asking me for, and the Comlex questions are, a lot of the questions are long, so you got to be able to get some direction and kind of decide what material is in the question stem that is not pertinent at all to the question.
Okay, there are some questions that I think people are also answering in the chat, but one question was, let's see, would you recommend taking step 1 or level 1 first, and why? I think Chance kind of talked over his reasoning for going about it. I think that's the same kind of advice I would adhere, because you don't want too much time for your brain to like info dump. But some people need longer breaks, so just, of course, like listen to you and your brain's telling you whether you can survive taking a test a couple of days later or if it needs to be a week later. But yeah.
I don't think it matters really what one you take first. You'll hear different things. Personally, I took step first and then Comlex, but for like step 2, level 2, I'm doing it in the opposite order just because it was the dates that I wanted. Like someone mentioned in the chat, the medicine's the same. Just keep in mind Comlex is a bit of a longer day. I don't know, maybe I'm hallucinating. It just felt way longer. So whatever one you think you want to get over with first, just do that. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter that much.
I would agree with that. I did step first and then Comlex for 1, and then for 2, I flipped them just because that was the days. And it really doesn't make a difference. I mean, I ended up for step 2, I did better on step 2 than level 2. So like, I don't know. I think it's just do days that you like, and just stick to those days and stick to your schedule and kind of just go with it. It's not going to make a huge difference.
Okay, the next question was, how do you know what review sources work for you? How long should you give each resource before trying something else?
I would say everyone should be using UWorld. If you need other question banks, TrueLearn was like, I found it too easy, but if I just needed to get questions, I just did it. Other people did Amboss. I didn't do that personally, but I know those ones are a bit harder. So if you need, I think question volume is number 1. And then Pathoma is totally necessary. I think you should try and get through that. And then in terms of everything else, like if you're a podcast person, there's some really good STEP podcasts like Daddy Golian, and those were essential. And if you find something's not working, I would say give it a good run. I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. And if you're not seeing progress and improvement in that area on your questions, you need to maybe revisit that resource and change how you're using it. Like some people swear by Sketchy, some people try it for a few weeks and like, I don't do well with the cartoons. It's not helping. So then just don't waste your time anymore. So I'd say give it a solid, honest shot for a few weeks, but everyone should be doing questions.
To add to that, I would say for TrueLearn specifically, do all of the OMM questions, and that goes for level 1 and 2. If you're not going to use it, at least do that. And then I also used First Aid for both. Step 1, it's great. For Step 2, the First Aid isn't as good, but it was still a good like foundation of an outline of things that I needed to know, and it was written like at a pretty, fairly readable level. So I would just kind of passively read it or like use it as a good thing to go through certain topics with friends and just talk things out. For Step 1, there's this YouTube channel called the USMLE Guys, and they have a Step 1 crash course, and they use First Aid as their basis to go off to their lectures and stuff. So if just reading First Aid isn't doing it for you and you need another input, like I can't just read something and remember it. I need someone to like talk it to me or listen to it, whatever. They're also a really good resource. And then, oh shoot, there was something else I was gonna say and I can't remember now, but if it comes back to me, I'll hop on again.
To add on to what Aaron said about that Daddy Goljan, I don't know how to pronounce the name. I loved it because it helped me like understand why you would pick certain things. It kind of gave like the first, I guess, couple of chapters of Pathoma and stuff where you just like understood why medicine instead of just like memorizing things. My brain cannot memorize. It'll just dump it like the next day. No matter how many times I relearn a mistake like question, unless I understood exactly why. So sometimes those podcasts or these like YouTube videos can be really helpful for that, for me at least. The next question I'll just read out loud because I had some responses already, but if anyone else has something to chime in, feel free. But someone asked, did anyone integrate Amboss into their study plan? And if so, how did you utilize the platform? And so Emily had said she liked it for the ethics questions. And then Kumi said she did for specific topics that she was struggling with just to get more exposure to those questions. If anyone else has things to say, feel free. But yeah.
I'll just say that UWorld is missing ethics. Like it's definitely, it was a weak part of all of my practice exams, and as soon as I started to figure out like what are like the kind of like just the key things, like how do you answer, what are they looking for, that like Amboss really helped me for that. So if you're going to use it for anything, I would use it for ethics.
Oh, and to add on to different YouTube resources, I used to use the Dirty Medicine whatever videos. So they have also OMM videos that like if you're trying to remember all those like whatever the little OMM points thing, the anterior and posterior ones, I always would forget it. Like I'd just rewatch it the day before or something, and then I'd watch some of his ethics videos for that. But yes, Counter-Strike, yes, I haven't touched OMM in so long. But let's see. Okay, the next one. And then Aaron also said First Aid is excellent for visuals too. Then the next question is, how do you actually, no, we already answered that one. Wait, I think it might be all the questions.
We're all caught up.
I think so. Sorry.
Okay. You're good. Thank you guys for asking so many questions. Keep them coming for sure. Just some things to follow up with what we've already kind of been discussing. What are y'all's thoughts on completely resetting your TrueLearn / UWorld Q banks at the start of your dedicated study time.
Personally, I didn't get through UWorld even once. So I think in theory, if you need questions, reset it. The issue is sometimes you'll remember a question, and rather than remembering why the answer was correct, you'll just sort of have remembered that specific question and what the answer was, so you're not necessarily learning from it. But I think if you'd been doing UWorld all year and then you reset it, I think that's fine because it would have been like 6 or 7 months since you started it. But I would say it's better to diversify your question banks if you have the resources rather than restarting one. But yeah.
I'm just gonna repeat everything she said. I also didn't even get through it all, so that's just kind of like my pace and how I was working. But definitely I would, if you're able to, I would use another bank just because it'll be new for your eyes, and you'll remember questions, and on the real thing, you're not gonna have known any of them. So new stuff.
I think full reset is overkill. I think it's a reasonable thing to maybe go back through flags or incorrects, things that you know you need some work on. Other than that, go to, you know, the practice exams and just do those instead. Like new questions. You need to learn how to adapt to new questions.
Oh yeah, doing all the NBME forms that you can afford, like financially and time-wise, very helpful because they also give you a % chance of passing within 1 week, which was really good to see your progress over like 4 weeks. If you take one a week and you're at whatever your goal percentage is for passing, then you kind of know you should take the exam. So those are really good for questions too.
Yeah, I agree with Chance that hard reset is too much. I think utilizing your incorrects, with the caveat of like what Erin was saying, you want to be able to go through your incorrects, and when you pick an answer, you have to like be able to tell yourself, this is why I'm picking this answer. This is the medical rationale for it. It's not straight from memory. So like talk that through with yourself in your process. But it'll help you highlight your weak points and come back to those and maybe like, oh, wow, I need to review this one more time type thing.
For me, like relatively like a few weeks before taking the exam, I think I was getting close to like nearing the end of my like TrueLearn bank, and I like hated the mixture of questions I was getting because I was kept doing new. So I'd say like you can reset for like that purpose of like just quizzing yourself on like a good mix of questions, but not to like redo the entire bank. But yeah, I'd say like the same thing of like just make sure you're not answering just because you remembered it, and be very truthful and like honest with yourself, because it's very easy to be like, oh no, I couldn't have memorized that, because I know, like, not to shade anything, but like I've been told by like a school person that, oh, you couldn't memorize any of your answers, like just keep going through them, and I could definitely remember. So be honest with yourself and make sure you're not getting an inflated percentage and thinking that you're doing great if it is something that you are remembering. One of the questions that's being answered in the chat as well is, when would you all recommend starting the NBME exams? Erin mentioned it depends on when you take your exam. She said it would say the last 4 to 6 weeks, and then don't forget about the free 120. I think there's like an old version and a new version. I don't think I took both, so I can't compare. But I heard they're great. And then Emily said she did the free 120 very close, like a few days before the exam.
I would say like for step 1, I think I took one right at the beginning of dedicated just to see where I was. But then for step 2, obviously I didn't get a dedicated. So I think it was just like, I don't know, maybe I took them at the end of June, so maybe like April I took one just to be like, all right, let's scare myself. Let's see how much we need to crank into gear. And then Amboss also has the self-assessment that comes out pretty early. But just take it. It's free. It's whatever. Just use it as a learning tool.
Yeah, I forgot about that self-assessment for Amboss. I would sign up for that and just kind of like, I think it's like a 4-hour thing. Just, dedicate a Saturday to it or something and just do it.
I too did a practice test during the dedicated whatever time to scare myself. So if that's something that you need to do to yourself, we support it. Okay, the next question that's also being answered in the chat is, should you ever use your UWorld average to gauge preparedness or just use it for more to learn more from it? I agree with Erin, just use it as a learning tool. I would always get sad about my UWorld percentages. And so did Emily. She said the same thing. Don't
I
let
don't know
the
about you, but I'm proud of my 20% average, so kidding.
better than 0, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see your percentages go up a little bit over like the course of dedicated, but don't let it freak you out if you're like a week out from your exam and you get a 40%. Just like use it as something to learn from and be like, okay, here was a gap, let's learn it. And now I won't get that wrong again. So
Okay. When it came to the actual exams, like on exam day, did you find that the exams that you took were including like buzzwords and the high yield words that we learned throughout our didactics, or you think they're starting to kind of stray away from it and kind of rephrase those buzzwords?
I think there's some. I also will say that the free 120, a lot of the pictures from that, and even some questions verbatim will show up on your exam. And then there's also like some high yield photos and stuff, especially on Comlex, that you'll see the same photo over and over again just based on the practice tests. So I think honestly, photos are really high yield. Buzzwords, sorta, kinda. Um, but yeah, photos for some reason they like to reuse the same ones.
I personally don't think it was very buzzword heavy. I think buzzwords helped me to like remember things and consolidate things, but then in the test you kind of are reading it and you're like, they describe it in a different way than the buzzword, and you're like, is this what they're getting at? You can kind of like do that a little bit, but I don't really remember any buzzwords. But the pictures from like any of the NBMEs, like all of those, they definitely reuse. So if you could, I think there's somewhere online you can find like just a document with all the pictures and like saying what they are. And I think I looked over that like the day before, and that was actually helpful on a couple of questions. So
And that kind of brings me into our next question of, the day of your exam tips, day before exam tips that you'll have that worked really well.
Day before, stop studying. I don't know if you're gonna study, like some people don't study at all, but I was like, I can't just not study today for a test. So I think I stopped studying around like 12 or 2 or something like that. And then, just go do something relaxing, go grab a nice meal, maybe like carb load up, get yourself ready for a long day of testing the next day. And really just get a good night's sleep. And then the day of, I would very, very highly recommend just like having small snacks throughout the day on your breaks, just so you don't get like a little food coma or something like that. Prophylactically take Advil because you will probably get a headache from staring at the screen for too long. And I would always like chug water at the beginning of my break, and then eat something, go pee. Fruit snacks are my go-to. If you know, you know. So I'd always have fruit snacks on me just for a little sugar boost. Um, yeah, and I would honestly like do jumping jacks in the bathroom, like run up and down the stairs just to like keep my energy going. Oh, also my favorite thing to do is in the bathroom, I would just like talk to myself and do like power poses just to like motivate myself to get through the test. So do that for sure.
I would say if there's something you feel like you're gonna forget, like something you always get wrong or an equation you can't remember, write it down on a paper and put it in your locker because you can access it at a break. And it's probably a mental thing where you're not going to need it, but having a comfort, like I had a comfort equation sheet that I looked at over lunch and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to forget these questions if I get biostats or something. So keep that in mind, but don't use it as a crutch. And I would say I didn't study the day before, get a good night's sleep, and just tell yourself, I've made it this far, I can do this. I know more than I think I do. And you're not going to feel good walking out of the exam regardless. So really don't worry how you feel at the end of the exam. Just be proud of yourself that you literally just wrote an 8-hour medical exam.
The testing center I took Comlex in was actually the same testing center I took my MCAT in. Which in a way was like motivating for me because I was like, last time I was here, like I sealed my like ticket to go to medical school, which is like why I had the opportunity to take this exam today. It's like trying to like find a place that's like a as positive as possible for a testing center. Like don't go to a brand new city that you've never been before and like you're uncomfortable with like accommodations there or travel. Like try to be someplace where you feel at ease.
I would just say if you're like day of tips, just do everything that's normal for you. Like, I don't know, if you eat the same breakfast every day, just do that. Bring the lunch that you always eat, you know. I'd probably bring extra caffeine if you're a caffeine person. I brought super coffee. I liked them because they also have like protein in them. So I just felt like it gives you a little, it's not just coffee, you know, fills you up a little bit too. But those are my day of tips. Just kind of do your normal dress in layers if you get hot or cold.
I also packed a lot of caffeine to like space it out throughout the day because I knew it was going to be super exhausting. So I think every 2 hours I had some form of caffeine, but I didn't drink a lot of fluids, which is kind of one of my faults as a human to begin with. Like I never am hydrated. So for me, that worked that day because I didn't have to like pee a lot during the exam. So that helps me focus and I'm not like, man, I need to run to the bathroom. Um, so whatever your source of caffeine is, if there's a mobile version that you can have on break, I would definitely recommend it.
And then we can do Catherine's question before we just start wrapping things up. She was wondering if you found it helpful to do content review and then the questions to reinforce it / learn it, or just do mixed topic questions and review. It's kind of hard to have enough time to watch videos, do flashcards and questions every night on top of the didactics and studying for exams.
It's a tough balancing act. Trying to do what would be the ideal setting for studying for board prep versus and juggling that with what the school considers, wherever your school is, what your school considers is an ideal environment for board prep. They will probably not be the same. And so, you definitely don't want to, like fail a class because you're too focused on board prep. And then you end up with a huge red flag on your application anyway. So definitely take care of your class. And like I said, it's a juggling act. Try to get in a little bit each day. Some days, I always was like 6 questions was my baseline. It was like I'm always gonna do at least six. I don't know why six. It just because it made me feel good. 6 questions was like the bare minimum, and then I try to do an average of about 20 questions, and I didn't hit that number a lot of the time. But when you stack that up, it's like 2 weeks go by, and you did at least 6 questions a day, and then a couple of days you did a little extra. And it's like that's another, you got about 100 questions under your belt that you did that you just wouldn't have done otherwise, and you got another, handful of cards if that's what you do, if you do Anki, that you just feel like you've got that under your belt and ready to go. And so, it's tough. The medical school is what it is, and you got to just, you got to work hard. It's hard.
Thanks, guys. So if we could just have another final word from each of y'all of just, if you could do it all over again, any other pressing matters that we missed just throughout the conversation tonight. Definitely do's, definitely don'ts. Words of encouragement, as always.
The last thing I would say, kind of reiterating what I said earlier, like this exam is really hard, but it's doable and you are capable of it. Just remember that you've worked so hard to get to this point, so have grace with yourself going into it, that it is really tough. But you can get through it and everything is temporary. You're gonna grind like you've never studied before for the next like 4 months or whatever. But you can definitely get through it and you'll be so proud of yourself on the other side.
My last little bit. So I think it's really important just to know yourself and know how you study and stick to that. Don't get distracted by what everyone else is doing. Just so kind of like set your things that you do. Like I literally just did UWorld and my charts, and that was pretty much it. I mean, outside of I guess Sketchy and Pathoma, but that was kind of like for step one. And then just kind of like do your own normal routine and make sure you schedule in breaks. So like if you like to work out, make sure you work out. If you like to, do whatever you do to enjoy and relax, like schedule that in regularly so you don't kind of like feel like you need like a whole weekend off or something and you feel guilty, but like, don't get too far burnt out. So just schedule in your breaks, and then everyone always feels like you fail at the end. So just know that's normal and just kind of go do something, enjoy yourself, hang out with friends or whatever, just so you have something to look forward to afterwards.
I was a big group studier and I still am. So when it came to dedicated, I was like, I don't know how to do this by myself. I'm too codependent. But my friends and I would set aside like specific times where we'd be like, hey, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna go through like 10, 20 questions together and talk through them. And that's something that I found really helped me because, we were still getting to spend time together and studying. And I just learn better when I'm around others like that. So like definitely don't isolate yourself. It can become very lonely during dedicated because all you're doing is studying, so is everyone else. But like Emily said, plan just like a quick dinner once a week with your friends or something. Like stay connected, talk to your friends and family, and really just make sure you schedule in good little breaks here and there so you don't.
My greatest advice is like take this very seriously. Like I did not take board studying seriously because the new onset of pass fail, I like said earlier that I was like, oh yeah, I can pass a test. I've been passing tests for the last 2 years, whatever. No, this is a hard test and it deserves a certain amount of respect, and know your opponent for this exam and make sure that your dedicated is like a peaceful time. Try to set yourself up that you don't have a whole lot of other stressors during that time. I mean, life happens, things can be unexpected. But if you have any ability to try to like be in a place, whether it's like going home to your parents' house or in an apartment like by yourself, like where you'll have like the most peace and ability to effectively study, yeah, and take care of yourself, eat well, have a good balance of like study, but yeah, breaks and everything. yeah, there's so many things I would like do differently now looking back. Like I got through it just fine at the end of the day, but like complete transparency, like I basically realized, oh shit, like I'm gonna fail this. And had basically 2 weeks of come to Jesus where I canceled like so much stuff like pre-wedding. Like I didn't see my husband until like the day before we got married because I like stayed in Blacksburg and grinded so hard, but I was like scared for like my position in school, orthopedics, like it was a big deal. So don't be me, like be early on this, like take it seriously. And you'll have so much less stress in the long run, and then you'll be set up well for rotations and stuff too.
Earn your confidence, and then once you earn your by starting early, work hard, and then once you earn it, then keep it, because sometimes it'll, things will really try to tear it down. I had a lot of people say that they thought Comlex was harder. I disagree, because I felt like Comlex had a lot more first order questions. That was like, do you know this? And it's, yeah, I know that. Click, move on. STEP USMLE was not like that. It was like connecting multiple concepts. You're like, I'm pretty sure it's this, but I didn't quite have that. And so it's like you needed to sit there and be like, okay, I got this. I know that I got this because I've been working at this for a long time. I've put a lot of hours into this. And then lo and behold, you come out the other side, your imagination goes crazy for a month, and then you get your score and it's like, hey, everything was fine, so just start early, work hard, and if some days you don't have it, you don't have it. I had several times where it was like, I'm not going to spend 4 hours to do 10 questions and just dilly-dally when I could go take a break, come back later, and crank stuff out. And so you got this. You guys are in school, you're working hard, you made it, you're already going through the grinder, and you'll be able to do it.
To like quickly add on to what Chance just said, I feel like I always like would question myself at the beginning of my board studying of like, oh, I don't know enough. Like I should study more to get this question right. But by the end of it, like you should trust your gut instinct. Like even if you don't know exactly why your brain's telling you, this answer is this, like you should trust it and not keep second guessing yourself, because you're not going to know everything on the exam. And you've, like he said, put in the work to where I think your brain's like making the connection, but you just can't like, you don't have the time to reason through it sometimes. But just start trusting your instincts as you get further and further on. Because like they say statistically, the first answer choice you pick is usually the right one. But yeah.
Perfect. So that kind of wraps up, our session today. Sometimes an hour doesn't feel like enough, but if you guys still have questions, DM us on Instagram, email us, and we can give you any contact information that you're interested in. All these guys are definitely willing to help with any and everything that y'all need for boards and even, life after. So thanks again for being here. We'll see you guys at the next event, maybe at conference, and have a good night and rest of y'all's week.
Bye.